on this computer here. Gosh, the
It
last
really
time
is beautiful out there, isn't it? It's like another day in paradise.
I, well, I was just thinking the last time that I talked to you, and that's the thing that I hate about these Zoom interviews. I mean, we were out in your facility in front of one of the habitats, and it was a beautiful day, and you were standing in front. I mean, it was just so nice. And this just lacks that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
tried to bring the spots.
you do what you can, I guess. So anywho, I didn't know. Have you done an interview since? I mean, I know you were on Dancing with the Stars and had done some national stuff, but have you done anything locally since all of this?
I did something with, oh gosh, Cynthia Smoot and
Okay.
Kathy Unruh.
Okay. Yeah, Cynthia is one of my peeps. I worked with her up in Greensboro, North Carolina. So she's great people. Loves the horses. So
Yes,
I guess talk to me. How are you doing? I mean, this year has been absolutely crazy.
it has been a crazy year, and ooh, this is all my stuff saying it's time for your alarm, your meeting with Chip. Sorry, I set too many alarms.
Yeah, no, you're good. So I'll ask you again. So how, I mean, this has been a crazy year. How are you doing?
COVID-19 struck us here at the sanctuary on March the 15th when we realized people were getting sick from close contact, and our tours, as you know, are like 20 people close together.
Right.
So we decided to shut down our tours so that we weren't exposing the public or our people. And then they started saying cats were actually catching this at some of the zoos. And so that was kind of freakish. And then 5 days later, Tiger King came out, and you know what happened with that. I mean, it was just the perfect storm of craziness. And there was a huge amount of an outpouring of just vitriolic, hateful death threats against me and my family, and people that even said they wanted to kill the cats. And in some cases where the people would slow down long enough that I could actually engage them and talk, I'd say, "Why do you want to kill the cats?" And they said they felt like it was because these magnificent animals didn't belong in cages anywhere. And I actually agree with that. And so it's been a long, hard process since Tiger King came out to educate people that zoos and sanctuaries are not the same thing, and that zoos are in the business of exploiting animals and sanctuaries don't want animals in cages. But as the public has been able to get that message, then we've seen a shift where people are really turning around the way they think about big cat rescue and what we do here. And as awful as Tiger King was for me personally, as far as people thinking that I killed my husband and cheated his family and all of the horrible things that were said there, the good news is that people did learn about cub petting. So many people didn't believe that was a thing. I mean, it's a thing because you're in Florida, and Florida's like the kingpin of that stupid activity. But people in other states, they were like, no, no, surely nobody does that. That's wrong. And so it was good that it became a national thing that people understood now that this actually happens and shouldn't happen.
A year ago, I mean, people in Tampa Bay knew about Big Cat Rescue and probably knew the name Carole Baskin, maybe. Now, I mean, I mean, everybody knows you. Is that a positive? Is that a positive for your mission? Is that a positive for what you're trying to achieve? Is the fact that, pretty much, I mean, there are very few people now that can't say that they've heard of Carole Baskin or know what Big Cat Rescue is about.
I wasn't really aware of that until I went out to Hollywood for Dancing with the Stars. Because, like you said, people here locally, everybody loves Big Cat Rescue. And everywhere I went, people would come up and they'd want a selfie with me and they wanted to tell me how much they loved their visits. Just like you started out, it was so nice to be at the sanctuary and to meet the cats. And so I got that kind of attention from people all over the place. I even had a person was driving like one of those big heart buses and pulled right up alongside of me and opened the doors so that everybody could wave and say how much they love Big Cat Rescue. So that kind of thing was just common. But when I got off the airplane, I had taken a private jet out to Hollywood because of COVID. I didn't want to expose my family to COVID. And I didn't pay for that. Dancing with the Stars paid for that. But I get off the plane in this little private airport and people start running over to have selfies with me. And I'm like, how do these people over here have any idea who I am? And so that was my first like wake up call as to this being bigger than just a local phenomenon.
Well, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, the last time that we spoke was right after Joe had been sentenced, I believe. And I didn't know the craziness that you were going through all the way up into that until I actually watched this Netflix thing and saw that this was just absolute craziness. And talk about that and then talk about this. I mean, you went from one crazy world to another.
I know you're struggling like I am. It's like, is there any other word than crazy? Because you just all of this was just so freaking
I'm at a
crazy.
loss. I'm at a loss. I truly am.
One thing that Tiger King did not really show was that this had been, oh gosh, I mean, first run in I had with Joe Exotic was back in 2004. And he had been in the news because he had a deformed lion cub born at what he called a sanctuary back then. And the reporter who talked to me asked what I thought about that. And I said, sanctuaries don't breed animals. So that's not a sanctuary if they're breeding animals. And so he took offense at that. And from that day forward, he was just determined to shut me up and did everything in his power. And I mean, he was constant. My name was just like constantly in that man's mouth. And he had a little YouTube thing that he would do, and he got a hold of my diaries that had been stolen back when my husband disappeared. And so he would read those on his show, and he was constantly trying to stir up his fan base of people who were exploiting wild animals and wanted to pay to pet cubs. He was constantly trying to stir them up to kill me, to rape me, to break my legs. He kept saying, you've got to put a bullet in her head to stop her. She's never going to stop. She's going to come take your pets away from you, and all kinds of nonsense like that. And when that didn't work in about 2014, the first person that he actually tried to pay to kill me came to me and said, you should know, he just tried to pay my husband, who's a sharpshooter, had been a sharpshooter for the military, to kill you. And so I reported that to the police and to the FBI. And then a little while later, another woman called and said, hey, he just tried to pay me to kill you. I thought you should know about this. And so all these people had been telling me this. I had been sharing it with law enforcement. I had even gone down to the courthouse here to try and get a restraining order against him, and couldn't get one because they said he had never actually touched me. And I've never even had a conversation with a man. So, I mean, I've never even been in his presence except in courtrooms. So I couldn't get the restraining order. But it wasn't until what you saw in Tiger King that the law enforcement finally took action on all of these threats that had been happening for over a decade. And I was really more shocked than anything that they actually did take any action. And some of, all of the wildlife charges that he was caught for and cited for and convicted for were things that they just never bothered to enforce against anybody, even though it was illegal. And so it was really good to see that happen. And since Tiger King came out, I think because of the fact that there was so much attention toward this, and people really do hate to see these animals abused and killed and treated the way that they were treated by these places, then you've seen this whole raft of people who were in Tiger King being taken down. So Tim Stark has lost his license and all of his animals have been taken away from him. Doc Antle has been indicted now for wildlife trafficking and abuse charges. And I really hope that those charges will stick with him. He's about the slipperiest, I think, of all of these people. Jeff Lowe has had his license revoked, and he's being looked at by the DOJ right now. We've taken possession of the GW Zoo in that long, long legal battle that we've had with Joe Exotic. And even that, Tiger King tried to make that like, this huge battle between me and Joe. I never had anything to do with that. My husband was always the person that was dealing with all of the litigation, but it didn't sell. That doesn't look like some Karen telling you you can't have fun and do what you want to do with tigers if it's one man going after another. So I think there was a certain level of misogyny there in that whole narrative that they tried to paint.
Some of this has been hurtful for you, though, I would imagine. I mean, the whole reliving of your missing husband and the Hillsborough County Sheriff going out and saying that this is still an open investigation. And how has that taken a toll?
Well, that actually could be a good thing that it's still an open investigation. And I really do hope that they get leads from the things that have been done. I do think that, going out and posting the billboards right before I had to go out onto the dance floor and then making sure that I got a text telling me that that had been done, or filing the lawsuit against me right, 5 minutes before I was about to go out on stage again, making sure that I knew that had been done right then. I felt like those were things that were meant to harm me and to make me perform badly and just to, ruin my fun in their minds. But the good news is that if anything does come of it, I am sure that I will be exonerated in it, because I was the only person in Don's life who was trying to get him the medical attention that he needed. And I really believe that he crashed out over the Gulf, and somebody probably knows something somewhere. And so I do hope that that comes out.
Talk about moving forward. Can you go? I mean, I know you used to like to ride your bike in the neighborhood and down the trail. Can you still do that? Can you still go out and do what you used to like to do and enjoy, or are you kind of a prisoner from your own celebrity?
The first 3 months after Tiger King were the hardest. And during that period of time, my phone literally rang every 2 minutes for 3 months straight. And I have to have that phone on all night long in case a bobcat gets hit by a car. We will go anywhere in the state of Florida to rescue that cat and get it to the medical attention that it needs. But I couldn't do it for 3 months because my phone just would not stop ringing with people calling and being hateful and, thinking that they were being so clever in some of the things that they said. And so during that period of time, I also found that riding my bike back and forth to work, which is how I get to and from work, I try to be earth friendly, and it's only 5 miles between my house and the sanctuary. So I ride that each day. And what I found was people would actually like congregate on the trail to try and stop me to get a selfie with me. And so everybody who was on the trail was really nice. Everybody who's talked to me in person has been just lovely. But it's just kind of freakish because I had just gone through seeing all of that in Tiger King and all of the talk that they had. Plus, I'd just been through the trial as well, all the talk that they had of having somebody wanting to kill me on that trail. And so when somebody comes running up to me, I don't know if they're friend or foe, and trying to keep them both at a distance because of the fact that they could be there to harm me and because of COVID-19. It's been, that was a real challenge from in the beginning. And I still, every single day riding to or from, somebody will stop me or a couple of people will stop me. But in those first 3 months, it was like I couldn't make it down the trail at all without people just constantly gathering around and doing that. And people in their cars, oh my gosh, I mean, I have nearly been run over by so many people because they're filming while they're driving, and then they want to get their selfie, so they like swerve out in front of me and jump out of their car and ask if they can get a selfie. And it's like, I'm just riding off into the grass trying not to hit their cars. And they're just so focused on that, whatever that is that people do with, I'm just not into selfies, but it's a big thing for an awful lot of people. And they just seem to not pay attention to anything else, or how dangerous that is for everybody around them.
They're in their own little world, I guess. So moving forward, once we exit this COVID world, if we ever do, I mean, do you see things going back to normal at the sanctuary? Do you see the tours resuming? Do you see, or is this, kind of, is that a chapter that's closed?
Yeah, I don't know. Especially now in the UK where they said there's this new strain of it, and it's like, it, and also you've got the situation of there's so many people who, even with a vaccine available, are not going to be willing to take the vaccine. And so at what point do we feel like it's safely not a problem to have 20 people close to each other? And I never want to be like a zoo where people are just wandering around unescorted, because this is a sanctuary for the cats and I don't want people annoying the cats. That's why we have them in tiny little groups together. So it's possible that if we can get COVID under control enough that maybe we could do very small groups where we can kind of like space everybody out, we might be able to do that. But I don't think we'd ever be able to do the kind of volume that we did before. And, for us, volume was like 27,000 people a year. I think the Flowery Park Zoo does like 1 million people a year. But even at 27,000, I don't see any way that we could do that. And that's cut a third of our revenue. We have to raise $3.5 million a year. And so over $1 million is not coming in because we're not doing tours, which is why I've been doing Dancing with the Stars and cameos and selling U2's dolls and bobbleheads and all kinds of crazy stuff, trying to make up for that shortfall.
Well, I mean, it was just such a benefit. I mean, both my kids went to West Chase Elementary, and so they took the tours over there, and so I mean, I know that's something that we're all missing. Was it a volunteer or a worker that was injured recently? Is she? I mean, is that what's going on with that?
It's Candy. Sorry about that. I have to monitor the radio because my daughter is on vacation. Yeah, it was one of our volunteers, and all of our animal care is done by volunteers. And it really underscored how necessary it is for our federal bill to pass. The federal bill bans the cub petting and it phases out private possession. And it's the cub petting that is generating hundreds, if not thousands, of these big cats every year who are used for the pay to play schemes where people do their selfies with the cubs. And then they can only use them until they're about 12 to 16 weeks old. And then they can take the finger off of a child. And so it's all of those cats ending up in backyards and basements and in the illegal trade for their parts that is creating this huge problem that we have in America. And sanctuaries are in the business of rescuing those animals and giving them a forever home. And the people that are trained here to take care of these animals go through the most extensive training anywhere in the world. The particular volunteer that we're talking about, she had been here for 5 years. She was our highest level, which is a green level. And she had to work with the smaller cats for 3 years before she could even start working with the bigger cats because of the fact that these cats are so dangerous. And they are always looking for you to make that one mistake. You've got one chance with them. And if you let your guard down for a second, you are done for. And there shouldn't have to be people like Candy or any of my other volunteers here putting their lives in harm's way because of the fact that our government is unwilling to act on what they should have been acting on all the time. And now we're starting to see them actually finally doing that, where USDA is finally saying, you know what, maybe you shouldn't be taking the cubs away from their moms that early. And you know what, maybe the cub petting really is a bad thing that's driving all of this abuse. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service saying, yeah, we know it's illegal to be selling tigers across state lines. Maybe we'll actually put somebody in jail for it. So finally getting our government to take some action on that should dampen that whole thing. And as you may have seen, on December 3rd, our federal bill passed the House with a 2/3 majority vote and would have passed the Senate if we could have gotten a single Republican leader, because the Senate's Republican controlled. Just one Republican, all they had to do was ask for a phone call. It's called a hotline. And what they do is if nobody objects to the bill, it passes. And not one of them was willing to do that, even though we had bipartisan support in the Senate. There was nobody willing to ask for that hotline. So it will probably die this year, but we will do it again next year. We've been doing it every year since 1998. We will get this bill done that makes it illegal to be using these cubs that way. And it will finally phase out the private possession of big cats. So she's doing okay. She's really struggling because there's nothing worse than a tiger bite that I can even imagine, but she's in good spirits. And she is, you know, of all the people here, she's the last person in the world that I ever would have thought would make a mistake like that, because she just is such a rule follower, but it just takes one split second and that cat was ready.
Well, the thing that you and I talked about the last time that really kind of struck me that a lot of people don't know is that you had made the comment to me that you wish that you weren't in business, that there didn't have to be sanctuaries like this for this. And that's
Right.
kind of what you're saying right there is that you're serving a purpose because these things are happening.
You know, as soon as our federal bill passes, the cats who are in private hands will die out over the next 5 to 10 years. And this whole problem goes away. And then sanctuaries like mine don't have to exist anymore, because that's what's causing 99.9% of the abuse and discarding of animals is coming from the cub petting. And if we can just stop that, we can stop all of that abuse. And what people don't realize, and why I get so passionate about this, is the tiger is so close to extinction in the wild. And the reason for that is because of the unregulated trade in these animals in the US. If you get caught with a tiger tooth necklace or a tiger claw pendant or a tiger skin rug on your wall, all you have to do is say that that was your pet tiger, And because it's legal to have pet tigers here, there's nothing that's going to happen to you. Whereas it's so much cheaper to shoot a tiger in the wild for those parts than it is to raise a tiger up for 4 or 5 years at $10,000 per year per cat, which is what it costs us just in food and vet care to get them big enough to harvest those parts. And so we're putting huge strain on the wild tigers by allowing this smokescreen of all of these legal, currently captive tigers. And that's why we have to stop this right now before the tiger goes extinct in the wild.
So pardon my
Else,
there. No, I was saying, pardon my ignorance. What's the status of the movie? Is that going forward, or is there going to be a Tiger King movie? Or I know it was a series, or
I've heard people say there's going to be a Tiger King 2, and we had not talked to the producers until just like last week. Rebecca Chaiklin reached out to us and said, I'd like to clear the air. And I told her to lose my number. My husband was a little bit nicer to her and said, we'll see what you do in Tiger King 2 and see whether or not you've redeemed yourself from what you did in Tiger King 1, because that was a bunch of lies. So we'll see if they actually do that. But I started to say what I'm really excited about, though, and I think the whole COVID pandemic has kind of kicked technology in the pants. You know, we're doing Zoom calls, whereas we wouldn't have been doing these a year ago, and people are using virtual reality more, and they're doing more things to, it ends up protecting the planet because we're not traveling so much, we're not consuming so much. And one of the things I'm really excited about, we had opened those augmented reality zoos in Plantation and over at Citrus Park, and we had shut them down when COVID-19 hit. But I just went back over there yesterday and opened up the one here, and I've got somebody going down to open up the one in Plantation, because that's something where people can still go in, they can take their phone and put it up to the posters of the cats and launch an app without having to touch anything in there and see those posters leap to life. And then we've got our virtual reality game that came out in June, and it's free on the Oculus Rift. And it's where you can actually rescue a tiger in the wild. You learn how to track the tiger in the wild, and you've got this park ranger that's guiding you through all of this. And then when you find the tiger, you find that she's been snared by poachers. And so you go through all of the things that our medical team would go through to make sure that she's healthy enough to release her back to the wild. And then you see her going after prey as she's released. And so I think those kinds of interactions are what are going to make people really care about tigers. Seeing a tiger languishing in a cage at a zoo, that's not going to make anybody care about protecting habitat. But if you've saved a tiger, you all of a sudden have a connection to that tiger, and you want to make sure that they have a safe place to live. And that means we all have fresh air and fresh water, because that's what our forests need, are the entire umbrella of species. So I'm really excited about how this entire 2020 freak show has actually pushed us into the future that we need to be in.
Wow. I don't normally do interviews this long. You know, I'm more normally quick, but you know, I had you. So is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything that I'm missing?
The only other thing is I'm really excited about a new movie that's coming out. We had also worked on it for 5 years. We had worked with the producers of Tiger King for 5 years. And at the same time, we were working with this other group on something called Hidden Tiger. And it is what we thought we were working on with the Tiger King people. It's something that really shows what's happening with the tiger in the wild. It talks to conservationists and biologists and scientists, and it has beautiful images of these cats living free, and talks about how we need to stop the captivity of these animals in order to save them in the wild. And that comes out on December 26th, and it's called Hidden Tiger. It's one of those where you have to like rent it for like $2, or you can buy it for $9, I think. But the money actually goes to the sanctuary, to Big Cat Rescue, if you come in off of our link. And so we'll be posting that on our social pages.
So you're hoping that gets as much traction as the other one?
You know, it won't. And the reason it won't is because it's not a freak show like Tiger King was. And that's sad, because it's the kind of message that everybody really needed to get and didn't get in Tiger King.
Awesome. I'm sorry. Oh, Avis, my photographer partner in crime, was wondering if you had any Dancing with Stars pictures or anything that you could email me. Oh, this is Avis.
It's been a long time. I've been
Yes.
time over there at Big Cat.
I could send you a Dropbox thing
Okay.
of all different kinds of stuff that you can overlay so people aren't just looking at my talking head.
Nope.
And then I'll send you some of those Dancing with the Stars images too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carole. I didn't ask you about the other thing that you told me not to ask you.
Thank you.
This is crazy.
I don't want to breathe any oxygen into it.
Right, I understand. So I'm good, and just send me that, and you've got my email, and I sent you my cell phone number. Call me anytime, and keep in touch.
Thank you, Chip. Have a meowy Christmas and a happy New Year.
You're killing me.